All right, welcome back. We are in day 5 of our virtual vacation Bible school, and we're just so excited to be able to provide this to everyone this week. I hope that, again, you are enjoying these lessons, and I hope that you are continuing to go back and to study these lessons as well further for yourself. I'm just trying to give you some starter here and talk about a few things and kind of challenge us and challenge our thinking and trying to help us to grow spiritually. And so today, day 5 of our Vacation Bible School, we're going to look at day 5 of creation. As we look at Genesis chapter 1 and we look at all these different things that God has done through creation, the way He created things, that He spoke all these things into existence, and the way that this is all fallen into place by the plan that God had from the very beginning of things. I want us to look at today. Yesterday, we looked at God's power, His limitless power, and how powerful He is. But today, I want us to focus our attention to see God's creativity and just how creative God is with this. And so I want to go and I want to look at Genesis chapter 1 and beginning at verse number 20. And let's see and read here about the 5th day of creation. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creature, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, and every living creature that moves with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Again, when you look at this text here, and you notice that God here says to them, and we see again the very first part of this is, and God said. Again, looking at the fact that God has spoken something here and something is happening. He's speaking this into existence at this time in Genesis chapter 1. And we continue reading in this text and we look at it and said, and God blessed them and saying to them, again, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the water in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the 5th day. Again, God shows us here His power. God shows us how creative He is as He creates the world, as He creates the waters and let the waters swarm with these living creatures. And not only that, but there's a great detail in here that God gives us. And let the birds fly above the earth. You see, we go outside and we look around and we see these birds flying by and we like, well, how is that possible? Because God said it that way. God created him that way to do that. Let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of heaven. So God created the great sea and creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. It's not just something that God just threw something in there and said, you all go do whatever you need to do. I've just created you, you go figure it out. But instead, God put everything in the right place. He put the birds to where they could fly. He put the fish and the things that go into the sea. He put them in the sea, and He did it according to their kind. And so God here shows His creativity and how that He paints this. We just look at this and we see the beauty of heaven, and we see the beauty of the earth, and we see the birds, and we see the fish, and we see all these things, and they go in certain places and they do certain things. And all of that is possible because of a creative God that we serve. Now, I also want us to look today at Psalm 104. And as we look at Psalm 104 and verse 24, I want you to read here with me and notice what the Bible says about God again. Psalm 104 and verse number 24. Read along with me. O Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom have you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the sea, great and wide, with teams, with creatures innumerable, living things, both small and great. Again, God, how great you are, how manifold are your works. In wisdom have you made all of them. The earth is full of your creatures. Again, this happened because of a creative God that we serve, and He set things in motion the way that they were supposed to do. It's not just boom and here everything is and everything's in place and everything's where it should be, but God set things in motion and He did it in certain ways. And so I want us to look with me for just a moment. I want us to think about some things that God did in creation as we work our way through here. Again, in Genesis chapter 1, we find that God was the one that created. Inherent in the ideal of God is that He is an intelligent designer, that our universe is not just a universe here. It's not just something that just falls into place, but it is a universe that is a just right universe, meaning that everything is set and everything is done exactly the way that God wanted it done. When we look at the earth and we look around us and we go outside and we look at the trees and we look at the birds and we look at the animals and we look at all these people, we look at humans, we see all these things. Does the earth reveal design to us? Absolutely it does, 100%. We look at the trees, we look at the sky, we look at the seas, we look at the waters and all these different parts of the earth, and it demands and it pours out to us that it reveals to us a design. If the earth reveals purposeful design, there must be a designer. And that's key, because God in His creativity and the creative as He is, and He's setting all these things into motion, if the earth reveals purposeful design, and it does, therefore there must have been a designer. And indeed there was a designer, and that is God. The earth does reveal purposeful design. The earth must have a designer. It's not something that just bang and it happened, or it just fell into place that way, or just by happenstance that these are here and this is here and the birds are there and all these different things. But it was designed by an intelligent designer, and that intelligent designer was a creative one, and it was God. It is more reasonable to believe that the design of the earth was planned, and it was not something that just happened by accident. I want you to think about something with me. I want you to think about, for just a moment, the design, the location of the earth. 93 million miles from the sun, at 12 million degrees Fahrenheit heat source, with an interior temperature of more than 20 million degrees Celsius. And like a giant nuclear engine here, giving off more energy in a single second, notice with me, 8 million tons than mankind has produced since the creation. The exact distance to receive the proper amount of heat and radiation to sustain life as we know it. Notice, there's a key word in there, that it is the exact distance, not just something that may be or it just happened to fall that way, but God placed it in the exact distance to receive the proper amount of heat so that life could be sustained here. The location of Earth is just right. It is exactly right. What about the orbit of the earth? You think about God being a creative God and one that set things in order and did it exactly the way it needed to be done. Think about the orbit of the earth, the elliptical, and not how that is not a perfect circle. Sometimes closer to the sun, sometimes farther from the sun. It orbits not at a constant rate. When closer, moves faster. When farther away, it moves slower. It departs from a straight line by only 1/9 of an inch every 18 miles. We're talking about the orbit of the earth. The exact orbit to keep a proper and safe distance and allow for our seasons. You remember yesterday, we talked about the seasons and God creating that, and He creating the stars and all those different things. And here again, we find out when we do some research on this, that the exact orbit to keep a proper and safe distance and allow for our seasons. You see, when we look at this, the location of the earth is just exactly right. The orbit of the earth is exactly right. What about the rotation of the earth? Rotates at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, while Earth orbits at 67,000 miles per hour around the sun, while solar system travels at 600,000 miles per hour. It provides periods of light and darkness necessary for sustaining light. If the rotation of the earth was faster, there'd be fierce cyclones would be stirred up all over the earth and it would be difficult to grow crops. If slower, days and nights would be impossibly hot or cold. The exact rotation speed to maintain proper balance of temperatures and seasons. You see, when we look at that, we notice that the rotation of the earth is just exactly right. What about the tilt of the earth? What does that have anything to do with it? Tilted at it on its axis at exactly 23.5 degrees. Notice it's not something that is just, here it is, I'm gonna throw some things at it, but it is exact 23.5 degrees. If it were straight up, water would accumulate at the poles, leaving vast deserts in between. There would be no seasons. If it were tilted 90 degrees, the earth would alternate between very cold winters and very hot summers. The exact tilt to sustain modern water levels, seasons, and temperatures is how God created it. The tilt of the earth is just right. It is exactly right. I want you to think about the waters of the earth. And we talked about the waters early on in our week, about God creating the waters. But notice, water covers 72% of Earth's surface. It provides a reservoir of moisture, constantly evaporating and condensing and falling as rain. Holds its temperature longer, providing a natural heating and air conditioner system for land areas. Human dependency on plant life. Plants give out oxygen, which we need. 90% of our oxygen comes from plants in the seas. Listen to me real carefully. 90% of our oxygen comes from plants in the seas. You see, the water coverage for providing us with ideal moisture, temperature, and oxygen is exactly right. And the waters of the earth are just right. You know, you think about the relation to the earth and the moon. The moon is 240,000 miles from the earth. The moon helps control the oceans and the tides. Tides provide cleansing of shorelines and help ocean life to prosper. Without tides, the ocean would stagnate, and the animals and plants living in the oceans and the seas would soon perish. If we move closer by just a fifth, twice a day, the tides would reach 35 to 50 feet high. The exact relation of the moon to earth to maintain the tide levels and ocean life is exactly right. The relation of moon to earth is just right. And so you see, when you look at these different things, and we could go on, and we could talk about the atmosphere of the earth, and we could talk about, does the earth reveal design? And absolutely it does. It's exactly the right distance from the sun. It's exactly the right orbit around the sun. It's exactly the right rotation in its axis. It's exactly the right tilt in its axis, on its axis. It's exactly the right amount of water coverage, and the list just goes on and on. Is it more reasonable to believe the design of the earth was planned, or it just happened by accident? And the answer to that question is, it was planned. And so we see in God's creation His creativity and how creative God really is, and how that He set everything exactly right. It's not something that just happened, but it's something that was set exactly right. God's design of this earth is amazing. And when you read about it and you study about it, you see just how amazing our God is and how good that our God is. But also, it is very important for us to look at this and to realize that we can gain wisdom from Him. We can look at His creativity, and we can look at His wisdom, and we can look at His knowledge of all these different things. And when we study all these things, it gets us to realize the God that we serve, the good God that we serve, and one that is able to make this design and to make it exactly right. For us to see God's creativity, we see a God that is awesome. We see a God that is a good God. And we can gain so much things from Him. You see, this earth didn't just happen. This earth just didn't fall into place. But this earth was created at the sound of God's voice. It was created by His words. It was created by Him saying, make this happen, and it happened. You see, we serve an awesome God. And we serve a God that is able to do anything that He wants to do that's within His nature. God is awesome, and when we look at His creation, we see His creativity, and we see how good that our God is.